So we've got the title slide here, which will indicate what we're talking about this morning. And if you can go on to the next slide, please, Sandra. So today's talk will be covering a number of items, including the Deanery and College roles and responsibilities, just so that people know where we stand with regard to the curriculum and the ARCP and who does what. We'll go through the ARCP derogations for 2022, because for those of you in training and for the trainers, obviously we've had derogations in line with COVID over the past couple of years. So we'll just go through those as well. We'll discuss the transitional arrangements and general principles for swapping from the old curriculum onto the new curriculum and who will be included in that. Some preparation for this spring's ARCP. There'll be a little bit of practical advice on how the ARCP outcome will map to the new curriculum, just for transition and what to think about and what to plan for. We've got some specialty guidance as well per training year, some information on transferring onto the new LEPT platform from the old one, and of course some contact information for if you get stuck at the end of that. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Jo now. Thanks, Jo.
Thanks, Claire. So just a couple of housekeeping points before we start. So we're recording the webinar this morning, and it's going to go onto the college website for either people to refer to again or for those that can't attend this morning. If you have questions, you can put all your questions in the Q&A box. The raise hand and the chat has been disabled. It just helps us to manage the questions, and we'll work through the questions at the end of the presentation. We will be finishing promptly at 11, so if we do run out of time for questions, don't worry, we'll put everything up on the website afterwards, so we will be able to answer them. So if we could go on to the next slide then, please, Sandra. So as Claire said, just a reminder about the roles and responsibilities, about who's responsible for what. So the GMC essentially approve everything that we do at the college, any change to a curriculum, any change to an examination, and even the ARCP derogations and the transitional arrangements that we're talking about this morning. We had to seek approval from the GMC, which actually came through on Tuesday evening. So all of this is very hot off the press, and those transition arrangements have been published on the website. In terms of the deanery roles and responsibilities, so they will be responsible for organising your ARCP. So you'll get your date and time and location, if that's relevant, from them, and they oversee the whole ARCP process, and then they will tell us at the end what the outcome of that is, and we keep records of that so that we can track all the trainees as they go through their training. And again, the GMC have oversight of the deanery and the activities, and they approve the training programs as well. And also just to mention the Gold Guide. So the Gold Guide sets out sort of all of the rules and regs, if you like, around postgraduate training, and there's big sections in there on ARCP as well. It is currently being reviewed and updated, but I believe it's not going to be published until at least August this year. So the Gold Guide that you'll be able to find on the internet is the one to use for your ARCP. So Sandra, if we can do the next slide. So just a little bit about the ARCP derogation. So prior to COVID, the college would have guidance around the types of evidence and other information guiding trainees and educational supervisors and TPDs about what to look for when it comes to ARCP time. Obviously with COVID, lots of things changed, and so this is our third year where we have put derogations in place for trainees and have put some more flexibility in, just to recognise some of the interruptions that COVID has caused to training. Our derogation guidance this year is really not very different to last year's guidance. As I say, it is available on the website, and just worth taking a look just as you're preparing for your upcoming ARCP. Next slide. The main difference this year, though, is that for a couple of years, the college has been working on new curricula, which were all published last July time. These curricula were to meet the various requirements of the GMC and general changes to postgraduate training. Again, that process of approval was a little bit interrupted by COVID, and so when we introduced the curricula last year, we only introduced them for the trainees who were starting in ST1 or ST3, depending on their specialty, and then we made the decision to transition everybody over after their ARCP this year. Just with everything that had been going on with COVID, we just felt that that would be more helpful for everybody. So as with everything else, the GMC set out how they expect transition to take place. And we have 2 years to transition most trainees over to the new curriculum. And that starts from the point of the introduction of those new curricula. So all trainees will be expected to transition to the new curriculum after their ARCP this year, apart from any trainees who are in their final year and who have a CCT date on or before the 31st of July 2023. So the GMC recognised that moving trainees who are coming up or in their final year of training might be more disruptive than is necessary. So for those trainees, you will remain on your current curriculum. Next slide, please. Okay, so then what we have is a set of general principles about how we approach transition. So once you have transferred to your new curriculum, then it isn't possible to revert back to the previous curriculum. And once all of the trainees in their final year have finished the old curriculum, then that curriculum effectively goes out of circulation. We also expect trainees to transfer to the curriculum in a linear fashion, if you like. So we don't generally expect trainees to go back. So, for example, if you finished ST4 on your current curriculum, you'd move to the beginning of ST5 in the new curriculum. We obviously make sure that we maintain all normal proper standards for education as we do this process, and we also make sure that we are as fair and as equitable as possible for all trainees. There may well be questions as we're going through, and trainees who have very particular training circumstances. So we're happy to consider those, and you can contact us individually about that and we can deal with those for you. And obviously we make sure that we provide information so it's clear about how that transition takes place, and we obviously want to make sure that we don't disrupt any trainees' progress, and we minimise that as much as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So for this year, again, we have some flexibility around the data sets that we are recommending trainees prepare for their ARCP. So this is just a list of the types of evidence that you would prepare. It's really not very different to what we expected pre-COVID, but there are a few flexibilities here and there. But discuss this with your educational supervisor if you've got any concerns or worries. But it's all the standard stuff: your workplace-based assessments, indicative cases that you've done. If you've needed to do an MSF, obviously that goes in as well. Any alternative evidence, there are some lists in your current curricula of what those could be, so you can refer to that. And then obviously if you've passed a college exam in the last year, then you can put that in as well. Next slide, please. Okay, So this is, again, just a bit of guidance about how to prepare for your ARCP. So, you know, meet with your educational supervisor and just discuss with them what you've done and then what you might need to do to prepare both for the ARCP and then also for the curriculum transfer. Just go through everything, reviewing what there is there, if there are any gaps, if there are things that you've not been able to do for whatever reason, and the educational supervisor can make recommendations around that. They can also look at what the capabilities are that they've identified and where they think that any capabilities still need to be met in the new curriculum, and that will help sort of place you as you move over and transfer to the new curriculum. And then once you move to the new curriculum, then you carry on in that curriculum from that point. So from that point, whatever the requirements are in the new curriculum, that's what you will work to. And as I said before, we don't expect trainees to sort of go back and complete previous training requirements on a new curriculum. Next slide, please. So once you're moved to the new curriculum, we obviously, as always, would expect you to achieve all of the curriculum requirements in order for you to be eligible for the award of the CCT, and that, as always, is managed through the ARCP process. Just a quick note about this date of the 31st of July 2023. So as I've said, the GMC allow us a 2-year window in which we have to transfer trainees to the new curriculum. But we do recognise that lots of trainees start their training at the beginning of August. So we know that we have lots of trainees who would have a CCT date of the 1st of August 2023, 2nd of August and so on. So we will exercise some flexibility around that. So if your CCT date is the 1st of August, please do contact us and we will include you within the group that don't need to transfer curriculum. There will reach a point where we reach the limits of our flexibility on that, but get in contact with us and we'll look at each case for that. Also, just to say, as I've referenced before, we do recognise that some trainees have a training history that can be quite complex for very different reasons. And again, you know, please contact us about that and we will work on that with you on an individual basis. That's part of our, you know, being sort of fair and equitable and flexible around training. So we will make sure that we pick all of those up. We do. Although we have a system where we try and accommodate everyone, we don't stick rigidly to a one-size-fits-all where that's not appropriate for the trainees. Next slide, please. Okay, so Claire, I think this is your part.
This is, so we've got 2 or 3 slides here just to give you an example of transition from the old 2015 Histopath curriculum onto the new 2021 version. It's really just to give some kind of practical advice here so that people don't feel threatened or intimidated by it. We just jump slides there. So the first slide here is basically just to keep everyone calm and say, for this set of ARCPs this spring, you'll still be preparing your ESSR and your portfolios in line with the 2015 curriculum. So I've put the example of the things that are required for stage B or end of stage B training up on the right hand side of that slide there. So as Joe has mentioned in a couple of slides back, you'll still need to have the kind of indicative case numbers, your workplace-based assessments, and hopefully the FRC Path Part 1 under your belt for a kind of smooth move to an outcome 1 at this stage. So remembering now that the stages in the new curriculum for the 2021 curriculum have gone. So we're not stage A, B, C, D, and E anymore, or A to D rather, but we're just following training years, ST1 through to ST5, plus or minus extra if you're doing extra modules. Next slide, please. So one of the things that it would probably be helpful for both the educational supervisors and trainees to do is to have a look at not only the current 2015 curriculum for histopathology for this example, but also the 2021 curriculum, and have a look and see if there are elements of the 2021 curriculum that you've covered by default that you can mention in the ESSR or in your portfolio. And the example that I've given up on the screen on the right-hand side is actually the capability in practice number 7 from the new curriculum, which is a new facet of learning that's been identified in specifically in this curriculum, the ability to self-appraise, learn, and adapt. Now, many of these elements we will be doing anyway. People probably wouldn't even be realizing that they're doing it, but you can have a look through and just review where you are on that now currently, and identify how much of that you've already covered, so that you can actually put it in your portfolio now for this ARCP. It also would be quite helpful because it will help to identify areas where trainees and trainers potentially may need support to access new learning opportunities required for the new curriculum. Next slide, please. So another thing to think about with preparation for this ARCP, and it's not just a look back at what you've done, but a look forward to what's coming up in the next 6 to 12 months, and to have a plan in place for covering the capabilities in practice. Say if you're transitioning from ST2 to ST3, what you need at that ST3 stage. So it's not an actual formal thing that you need to have in your portfolios, but I think it's quite useful in order to develop a plan, and so both the supervisor and the trainee know what they're headed for and what the aims are for the following training year. Okay, next slide, please. So this is where I hand back to Jo.
Okay, thanks, Claire. So I'm not really going to talk through these in detail, and this is available in the guidance that has now been published on the website. But this just very broadly gives you an overview of, firstly, how the ARCP outcome may be decided and what the potential outcomes are, and then the recommended action about what that means in terms of your transition to the new curriculum. You'll notice that it is quite broad, and that's because, as Claire's just said, and I've already said this morning, that this is all around individual discussions for each trainee with their educational supervisor, just with some broad guidance then about which ST year to move to in the curriculum. So this one is for trainees who are currently in ST1, and then Sandra, if we could move to the next slide, please. And this is for ST2. So as you can see, it's all fairly similar stuff, and then just shows how you progress through. And then ST3. Great. And then obviously you can see that some of the recommended actions get a little bit longer as we're going through, because we start to think about whether trainees have the FRC Path Part 1 or not, for example. And then obviously we're also thinking here about the other specialties that run off of histopathology, so neuropath, forensics and paediatrics. And then next one, please, Sandra. Even more complicated perhaps, but yeah, just again, still thinking about exam progress in this as well. And then the final one for ST5, please. Okay. And so as you can see, this one does make it clear which circumstances apply to trainees who actually don't need to worry about transferring to the new curriculum. So as I say, you can read all those in your own time from the guidance on the website. So Sandra, I think I'm handing over to you to talk about the LEPT system.
Thank you, Jo. Hi, everyone. So as Jo said, I'm going to share 2 slides about the LEPT system. So trainees transfer into the new LEPT platform. Trainees will transfer to the new platform after they've had their ARCP this year. But that's only if the CCT date is after the 31st of July next year. A bit of good news for both trainees and educational supervisors. The current LEPT e-portfolio will be migrated to the new platform. At first, the college wasn't going to do this, but we have been contacted by several people requesting this functionality, and the LEPT system developers have thankfully found a way to make it happen. So the plan is for the blue burger bar on the new LEPT platform to carry a new label, which will be marked migrated items or something like that. And it will be visible, obviously, by the trainee and the supervisor and the training program director and anybody else that the trainee has given viewing rights to. However, the caveat is that the college training department must have a copy of the ARCP outcome form, either sent in by trainees or the deanery or LEPT administrator. But the training team will then need to update the records on the old LEPT platform in order to facilitate this functionality on the new platform. So some trainees will remain on the old LEPT platform. Trainees will remain on the old platform if the CCT date is on or before the 31st of July next year. That is, those trainees who are in their final year of training. There will be some degree of flexibility depending on cases. For example, if a trainee CCT date is something like the 1st or 2nd of August 2023, the old LEPT platform will be phased out eventually, which may well be late next year or early 2024. There will be an opportunity for individuals to save their LEPT training records on their own devices. Do note that none of the training items in the LEPT system is lost. They are all in the back end of the system. We have been contacted over the years by consultants for access, for example, those needing access to their multi-source feedback assessment for validation purposes. So information about saving the training records will be sent out in due course to everyone so that you'll be able to save it to your own device. Once the old platform is phased out, then those training records, will be lost because the old platform will not be anymore. So just a bit about who to contact for things such as your ARCP dates and arrangements and decisions. Trainees would contact the local deanery or the LEPT. Any queries on the LEPT system, do email the assessment at rcpath.org. Myself and my colleague, Michael Gillett, will pick up those email queries. Any queries about training, example, your CCT dates, do email the training department at training@rcpath.org, and Jenny and her team, Louis and Adibir, will pick up those queries. And that's the end of the presentation.